Good evening, Lift Church. Welcome to the Discipleship Webcast. My name is Robin. I'm here with Courtney, one of our regional directors. Courtney, what are we talking about tonight?
Well, we're starting with celebrations. What are you celebrating?
We're celebrating. We got well. You're just so eager to celebrate.
Okay, fine. Well, before that, we're talking about kingdom finances and debt.
Dun, dun, dun.
So
the big evil debt monster.
Yeah.
Get comfortable. It's okay. It's not that scary. We're gonna conquer it together.
Yeah, don't worry.
Together, we're gonna be good. And we'll be back in just a second.
Tell you, so get ready for another breakthrough. So let me show you what I mean. Yeah. 'Cause what I got is the new thing. Yeah. Listen up, I'm gonna say it all right now.
So now, Robin, what are you celebrating?
I'm celebrating the crew from Mac D, Mac A, Guelph, Waterloo. They got together for a time of prayer and worship. Just so cool to see the unity in our church and just creativity and ways of gathering. And praise God for the beautiful weather.
Amen.
Come on now. So that was really cool.
Yeah. I'm celebrating Grace and the Brock fam for pulling together and serving Timbits, hot chocolate, and juice boxes in downtown St. Catharines.
I love that.
Awesome.
That's so cool. And kind of a neat multiplication moment from Max. I don't know if it was borrowed from Max or stolen from Max, but it's cool to see different people
for sure.
picking up ideas. So I'm celebrating Oge at Mohawk, who's been building relationship with the residence coordinators and helping to bring care packages and serving for students and residents at Mohawk. So way to go, Oge. Great job taking the leap, getting out of your comfort zone and interacting with those in residence.
Yeah. And I'm celebrating Gala
next
week. Woo! Celebrating everyone, getting their tickets. We're inviting people. It's going to be great.
It's going to be awesome. But we don't want to hog the celebration, so we are going to send it to Lisa, Kirsten, and Andrew, and they're going to celebrate a bit of their own.
Hey church, I just want to celebrate Levi and his simple church. They spent their huddle time creating some midterm kits to be able to be handed out on the residences this weekend, which is super exciting. Just really grateful for them as they continue to practice their serving muscles and just engaging with our campus.
Hey church, it's Lisa and Judy White here, just wanting to celebrate Sarah Wardrobe Smith, a dear friend of mine and my district leader, on her eagerness to lead our church in morning prayer every day next week at 8:30 on Discord as we anticipate Gala and all the exciting things to come. All right, so thanks so much, Sarah, and we love you. Bye.
Hey church, I just want to celebrate Joshua Guinness for running a book sharing hangout with the McMaster-C region. It was a really good time where we just shared some of the different books we're reading and just the impact it's had on us. So thanks, Joshua.
So we have an interview and a really special guest tonight, one of the Webcast team's very own. He's normally one of the people behind the camera, but tonight he'll be making a on-screen appearance. So who could it be? I wonder. Oh, Ruben! Welcome, Ruben. How's it going?
Not too bad. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks. So you've been serving a long time with production.
Yep.
How long has it been, and what are your roles?
Yeah, so I started 3 years ago, October, I think, on lighting back in 1280, and then went to CIBC Hall with lighting team, and then production lead, and then when COVID hit, blessed to be able to move to the studio instead, and sort of was on camera first, and then now producing when Sarah had a baby, so yeah.
That's awesome. And you've played a big role with this green screen as well and a bunch of other things that most of us probably don't know much about. So thank you. And why do you serve?
Yeah, like straight up it's worship, and I really love being able to worship in that way and just being able to serve God through that. And part of it is like it's a chance to do something with like technical excellence kind of thing and do a really good job in it. And not that that's the end goal of it in any way, but God's sort of delighted in that too. And we can use that as worship, and like doing a good job for him is pretty awesome. Like it's, and like So when COVID hit and we sort of left CIBC Hall, I was like, wait, I might not have that opportunity to worship in that way. Yeah. And then super blessed to be able to move into the studio production side of things and continue serving each Sunday. And it's part of my like Sunday rhythm of worship. So it's
That's
pretty,
awesome.
it's great.
Worship. Yeah, well, what you do super important for church. Yep. So what encouragement can you leave us with tonight?
Yeah, definitely. I would say like whatever gifts you have and whatever you enjoy doing, like that is like God's given you those gifts and joys, and you can use that for worship. And God's delighted in that as well. Like so, using your gifts to build His church, whether that be in your region or behind the scenes or on camera or leading others in worship, like go do that. That's awesome. And like wherever you are, find a need and fill that, and like worship through that. So so I guess like you could join the production team for that maybe, or any serving team. But yeah, honestly, message me if you're interested. We can get you connected. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ruben.
Yeah.
I will see you later.
Sounds good.
Okay, so now we're going to go to our daily Devo reading for the week.
Hey church, my name is Jeremy and I am from McMaster region, and I wanted to share today about the second half of John chapter 11. Last week, Wenbo shared on a little bit about John chapter 11 already, and if you haven't had a chance to watch that, I really recommend that you go back and do it. You won't regret that. It was very, very good. So something I want to talk about today is surrender. That's kind of the word that jumped out at me while I was reading this section of scripture. And just to give a quick summary, Lazarus is sick. He dies. Jesus arrives at Bethany 4 days after he's died, raises him from the dead, calls him out of the tomb in front of the crowd of mourners. And then this directly leads to the chief priests and the high priest making a plot to kill Jesus. A couple things that I want to point out is the fact that he would have known exactly what was going to happen when he made the decision to wait 2 days before heading out. He would have known how that could have been misunderstood by Mary and Martha, who he loved. When he arrived and waited outside of town for Mary and Martha to come out to him instead of going to their house, he knew that the crowd from their house would follow when Mary came out to see him. When he heard Mary and Martha tell him, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died, he would have known the hurt and the pain that they were feeling in that time, and he loved them. And ultimately, he would have known that this public sign would put into motion his crucifixion. He could have gone, as soon as he heard that Lazarus was sick, gone straight to their house, got there before he had died, and healed him privately in that house. And that would have been an act of love. That would have been a miracle, and it would have been amazing. But he didn't. He knew that the plan of God was way bigger than that. It was way bigger than a private visit for Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He knew that God had a plan for him that reached so many more. And despite the fact that he would cause personal pain to his close friends from that misunderstanding, And he would also feel anger and the pain and towards death and towards this and the sadness that he sees around him. Like, this is John 11 is where we have the verse Jesus wept. So he surrendered to these really intense feelings, and he surrendered to the fact that the miracle would lead to a plot to kill him. And I don't have much to add other than surrender is not easy. And it doesn't always leave us in a comfortable place of peace. It can often lead to pain and sadness. But surrender ultimately leads to God being glorified. And that's what really matters. All right, be blessed, church.
That was awesome. Next up is multiplication power-ups. So let's hear what Dan has to say.
Hey, I'm Dan, and I'm here with today's multiplication power-up. So typically the multiplication power-ups are designed to highlight tools we have that we've made here at Lift to help you be a better disciple-making disciple. Well, I can't think of anything that fits that description better than the Multiplier Apprenticeship. The Multiplier Apprenticeship is a 1-year program designed to help stretch and grow you in a number of different areas and to help you become that fully alive person you're supposed to be. We do this through intensive kind of in-classroom training as well as through on-the-ground deployment in certain roles. All kind of put together to help empower and mobilize you to go forward. Those roles could be things like being a tiller or a skirt, or one of our multipliers working cross-regionally, or a number of other different roles. But in the end, it's designed to help you grow and to stretch you. So I want to encourage you to take a look at that application and maybe even apply today. You can find the application online at liftchurch.ca/apprentice. There'll also be a link posted in the Discord chat right now. As well, if you have any questions about this, send me an email, daniel@liftchurch.ca, or just chat with me on Discord. I'd love to answer some questions, and I've already been chatting with a few people about the application and what this could look like in the future. This is a great opportunity to grow and to take that next leap in your journey with God. And so I just want to challenge you and invite you to take that leap with us today. Thanks, and back to the studio.
Awesome. Well, we're back into part 2 of our series on kingdom finances, talking about how to honor and use the finances we have or don't have, as the case may be, to see the kingdom of Jesus thrive in our lives and in the lives of those around us. And we started last week by talking about this idea of accountability and budgeting, really getting into the basics of healthy finances. But the truth is that finances are not that complicated. It's just often that we don't do the basic things well. Finances is a classic case of if you do a few basic things really well, it's pretty easy to honor Jesus in our finances. And today we're going to talk about one of the basics, which is debt. Debt is one of those things that can feel so overwhelming, so sort of paralyzing for some of you. There's a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions around debt. And so our hope is today to try to give our church family a clearer understanding of what debt is and how to work with it in the context of honoring Jesus with our finances. Okay, so really before we start, we have to define the terms here. So what is debt? Well, really simply, debt is any time that we are required to pay someone for something that we have already received. That's what debt is. Debt is when we are paying somebody for something that we have already received. Now, typically, the way that works is we receive money and we pay it back over time. But in essence, debt is saying, I'm going to pay for something that I received in the past. So it's a very past-looking thing. Now, debt is one of these funny things where it's kind of like boiling a frog. You know that famous experiment? I don't know if it's even true. I've never done it. I'm not into torturing creatures. Where you put a frog in a boiling pot or a pot of water that's not boiling, and you boil it slowly, and the frog, instead of jumping out of the boiling water when it reaches a boiling point, they just kind of are like, it's getting toasty in here. And they kind of just are hanging out in the warm water, and it gets hotter and hotter and hotter. And because it boils slowly, the frog eventually boils to death because it never noticed that it was dying because it was so hot. And it's funny, debt is exactly like that. Very few people end up in debt sort of in a moment because of, one major decision. People end up in debt over a long period of time, like the boiling frog. It's just slowly, the financial water temperature of our lives reaches a point until it's starting to kill us. And so the key with debt is learning to understand it, identify when we're being tempted with it, and learn how to make wise decisions around it. And so I want to give us some really clear thinking. Now, some of you might push back on some of this and be like, well, yeah, but I really want us to, as a church, have a clear understanding of what debt is. And in essence, that debt is bad. And some of you are going to react against that and maybe say, but we need to start by understanding that debt is bad at best and evil at worst. This is probably the most important idea I want you to walk away with from tonight, which is that debt is bad at best and evil at worst. In Romans 13, we're instructed, it says this, do not owe anyone anything except to love one another. Do not owe anyone anything except to love one another. This is in the context of finances, actually, in Romans chapter 13. You see, why are we instructed to not owe, to not borrow from our future to pay for our present? That's one of the ways that debt works, is we're borrowing from our future to pay for our present. Why is that? Well, debt is inherently anti-missional in almost every case for a couple of reasons. The first is that it erodes our ability to be generous and flexible with our finances. When we are carrying a debt load or a debt burden, we have to pay back that which we have already received. That means that we can't be generous with those finances, and we also can't be flexible and adaptable. The more debt we have, the more locked in we are to our financial situation, and the less flexibility we have. And one of the keys to living a life that is missional is being flexible and generous. And debt is inherently inflexible and not generous. Debt takes away our ability to be creative with our finances, to use it for an intentional purpose by instead taking those finances and paying off decisions from the past. To really help drive this point home, I'm going to say it even more clearly. Debt is a kind of slavery. Now, maybe you're going to react and say, Robin, you can't use that word. Well, Proverbs 22 verse 7 says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. Why is that? Because when we are in debt, we are literally working not to receive for ourselves, but to pay back somebody else. So when you are in debt and you go to work on that day, let's say you're $1,000 in debt and you're working for $15 an hour. Let's say you're $1,500 in debt. That means that you're going to work for a minimum of 100 hours for somebody else. Not counting interest and compounding and all the math. You are literally with debt working for somebody else. The money you receive is not actually yours to steward and invest in the kingdom. You're just going to have to give it to somebody else. Debt is a kind of slavery. It locks us in. It steals from our freedom. And I'm not talking about this individualistic kind of freedom. I'm talking about a missional freedom where we live to honor and glorify Christ. And debt is a kind of slavery. It locks us in. So the first point I'm kind of hammering home here is that debt is bad at best and evil at worst. And debt is a kind of slavery. You can tell Scripture's pretty heavy on this. The third thing that we can see here is in Luke 16:11. It says, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? If you have not been faithful with worldly wealth, who will trust you with what is genuine? In short, what is being taught here in Luke 16 is that debt and the way we handle our money is an indication of the kind of wisdom we have. And if we want God to trust us with serious things in the kingdom, we are required biblically to be good stewards of our finances. And one of the major areas of that is debt. All through the New Testament, we are taught that leaders must manage their households well, that manage their finances well. Because how can we steward that which is God's if we can't even care for our basic families? Now, I'm not saying this to lay these three serious points to lay a guilt trip on you, but to help us understand that when we talk about debt, we're playing with fire. We're playing with something serious. We're talking about something that really, really matters. What we do in our personal finances is a discipleship issue. It affects all areas of our life. And so the simple question I want to start us off with is, how do we stay out of debt? We're going to talk about what is debt and how to get out of debt, but I want us to land like, let's say you're not in debt. You're saying, this isn't for me. How do I stay out of debt? 3 steps for staying out of debt. Well, staying out of debt is actually super, super easy. It is not hard to stay out of debt. There's 3 basic tools you need. Staying out of debt, number 1, you need a budget. If you don't have a budget, it will likely mean that you're not saving. Let me say this again. If you don't have a budget, it will likely mean that you're not saving well. If you're not saving well, it means that you're likely not prepared for the future, which means at some point you're going to need debt. One of the best ways to stay out of debt is to build a good budget with good saving practices, where we minimize our expenses and save. So if you want to stay out of debt, for the love of everything good, just build a budget and follow it. Number 2, if you want to stay out of debt, is contentment. One of the main areas in our lives where we end up in debt is because we pay for that which we don't need and can't afford. Or to say it another way, I forget who quoted this, it's not my quote, but we buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like. Come on, have you ever done that? Have you ever bought something you don't need to impress somebody you don't even really like? Contentment. Just say no. If you feel yourself tempted to buy something that you can't actually afford, stop. Say, Jesus, sanctify me. Make me more like you. Iron this sin out of my life. Teach me true contentment. Just say no. And staying out of debt, number 3, accountability. Accountability. If you're struggling with it, or if you're feeling temptation, if you're feeling envious, share that with somebody. Invite those in your discipleship circle into your finances. Accountability is so, so important. These three things, a budget, contentment, and accountability, are the 3 basic tools to stay out of debt. This is good news. Basically, some good planning, some good stewardship, and some good disciples around you, and you can stay out of debt. But let's say you are in debt and you're like, man, I'm starting to feel really guilty. You don't need to feel guilty. There's no shame in where you are. Christ has freedom for you. For freedom, he has set you free. And the good news is that just as it is easy to stay out of debt, it's actually pretty easy to also get out of debt. You do not need to be ashamed. And those same three principles that I talked about, a good budget, contentment, and accountability, are the first three steps that you can use to help get yourself out of debt. And I want to reiterate this point about the boiling frog. Over time, we get used to living in a certain standard. We get used to carrying a certain amount of debt. And incremental changes in our finances feel easy. Oh, it's just another $10 a month. It's just another $15 a month. It's just another $30 a month. And next thing you know, we are spending $1,000 a month on stuff we don't need and don't want. Be aware of where your finances are going. Be content and talk about it with others. Okay, so as we talk about debt, I'm going to bring Courtney up in just a minute here, but we got to talk about interest. So that's just a high level, like just trying to frame our attitudes towards debt. I don't want us to be a church that is like laissez-faire, kind of like, that's not that bad. No, debt is bad. And we just got to accept that fact. But one of the main reasons that I think it's hard to get our minds wrapped around debt is that we haven't really considered how interest works. One of the most important things to understand when it comes to debt is interest rates. Now, interest is how banks, credit card companies, car loan companies, student loan providers, who are mostly backed by banks, it's how they make money. Interest is how they make money. And their goal when they give you debt is to make sure you pay as much interest as possible for as long as possible. Let me say that again. The goal of a credit card company or a bank when it comes to interest rates is to get you to pay as much interest as possible for as long as possible, because that's how they make money. So how does interest actually work? Well, let's start by defining our terms again. So debt is, as defined at the beginning, is simply any time we're required to pay someone for something we have already received. Interest is a fee that the person who has loaned you the money charges you to have access to that money, typically a percentage per year. Interest is a fee for having access to money you have not actually earned. So that one more time. Interest is just a fee that you are paying for the privilege of having money you haven't actually earned. And so when you have debt, there's two primary terms that come into play: principal and interest. Principal is the amount that was borrowed, and interest is the fee for borrowing that money. So whenever you have debt, there's the two numbers that you're paying. You're paying the principal, how much you've borrowed, and you're paying the interest, which is the fee for borrowing that money. So let's say you borrowed $1,000 loan at a 20% per year interest. This would be like a credit card loan. Well, that is a debt load of $1,000 plus $200 a year, so $1,200 a year. Okay, approximately. But you say, no problem, that's only $200. Well, first of all, that's $200 on $1,000, which is a lot of money, and it's money that you might as well have just burned. But here's the kicker. The fee for borrowing the money, the interest, is added to the principal. So let's say you didn't pay off any of the interest on that $1,000 loan in the first year. So in year one, it's $1,000 principal plus $200 of interest. But in year two, it would be $1,200 of principal and $240 of interest. This is called compounding interest. Now, of course, you wouldn't actually not pay the $200. I'm using this as an illustration to show how it gets worse and worse and worse over time. The interest becomes a part of the principal when you don't pay it. I had a friend, this is just sort of a funny story. I had a friend that had $60,000 of student debt. And in her first year, she borrowed $10,000 and she said, "Oh, it doesn't matter. It's free money, man. It's free money." And I was like, no, it's not free. It's not free. Bad. Well, she went out and spent $5,000 on liquor in the first 6 weeks. I could not believe what my eyes were seeing. I ran into her about 6 years later, and she had now had $60,000 of debt. And she said, "Robin, I'm going to pay off my debt in 2 years because I got a great job." And I said to her, "Unless your job's paying you like a ton of money, I don't think so." Why? Because of compounding interest. There's so much interest that you have to pay on that debt that you're barely going to get ahead in your first year. Her math was horribly off because she hadn't accounted for interest and taxes and cost of living and all these other factors. I want to help you see why interest is so bad on debt, but giving you a picture of what happens over the long term. So let's say, hypothetically, you had a $10,000 credit card loan. You had $10,000 of stuff on your credit card, and you were paying that off at a rate of $250 a month. Now, that $10,000 would take you about 6 years to pay off. Now, let's say instead of paying for that credit card loan at $250 a month, you paid $250 a month into an investment account, and you saved that money, and you invested it. Well, what would happen? So there should be a graphic up on your screen. So you can see there's the blue line. So this is you paying off the credit card debt in the first 6 years or so. And after 6 years, you have $0. You've paid off the credit card loan. Congratulations. However, if you look at the red line, this is if you invested that same money. Now here's the crazy thing. If you had invested that same money at a 6% growth rate on the investment, so we're going to talk about investing and saving later, but let's say you had a fairly safe investment, 6%, kind of market rates. Well, that 6 years of saving that money would have produced more than $20,000 in savings. So it's not just that you were paying $250 a month in credit card debt, it was that you were also not investing that money, not saving that money, not giving that money. So there is a cost. You might be like, well, whatever, $10,000, but I only missed $20,000. Okay, fine. Let me show you what happens over the rest of your life. Let's say after 6 years, you just stopped and you now took that $20,000 and you just let it sit in your investment account. You'll see another photo here after 30 years. Well, that $20,000 that you had been able to save would become somewhere around $80,000 to $90,000. So that $10,000 loan that you took to pay off the credit card to buy whatever it is you needed to buy actually cost you, when you're older, more than $90,000. When I say debt is evil when you have a long-term picture of your life. Now, this isn't just credit card debt. The same would apply on a car loan or a line of credit or even student debt. When we are paying these things down, it means that that money, which is using to pay for something in the past, can't be saved and invested in the future. Let me put it to you in a way that maybe is more practical for some people in our church. A $10,000 credit card debt is the difference between having a down payment after 6 years for a house or nothing. That's the difference. Or a good chunk of a down payment. All right, so that's me kind of just laying into some practical teaching, helping give you some framing. But I'm going to invite Courtney up to help us continue to talk about this, get more practical around different kinds of debt and how to navigate it. So we're going to take a quick pause and we'll be right back. All right, well, welcome, Courtney.
Thanks.
We're going to try and dialogue about this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Theory is that I might throw some words around that I'm not supposed to use, and then you can help me say it better.
I'll let you know.
All right, cool. So we're going to talk first off about different kinds of debt.
Okay.
So not all debt is the same. There's different kinds of debt, ranging from be careful to the house is on fire, run and scream and hide.
Yeah.
Hide your wife, hide your kids, like just run away. So first thing we got to understand is that debt is sold to us.
Okay.
Right? So
What do you mean?
what I mean by that is that banks, credit card companies, they want you to be in debt because they make money when you're in debt.
Okay.
And so Visa, MasterCard, the bank, they are not your friend. They might be very friendly, like my banker friends are very nice people. And they're very kind and generous. And some of them, are very helpful.
Yeah.
But when it comes to debt, their job is to make money. And if you have a banker friend, please don't take that too personally. I'm trying to illustrate a point. Don't send me hate mail. But that's how they make money. Debt is how companies make money. So what this means is when somebody gives you debt, Courtney, they don't really have your best interest in mind.
Yeah.
They're trying to make money.
Yeah. Okay.
And you kind of need to calibrate. So when the car salesman or the credit card person, I don't know if they still do this, like Scotiabank or whoever, or TD Bank would set up like these booths to give students credit cards.
Yes, they do that.
They still do that. They do not have your interests in mind. They're trying to steal from you. And I think we need to learn to kind of have just our red flags go up.
Yeah.
Like anytime somebody's trying to sell us debt, doesn't matter if it's good debt or bad debt or neutral debt or whatever. It's like, hold up.
Say no.
Just say no. just run away. Say, I'm sure you're very nice, but I'm going to run away. So that said, there's different kinds of debt. The first kind of debt, which is probably not the most relevant to a lot of people that are listening to this, but is also important for us to understand. So this would be the least bad kind of debt.
Okay.
And it's called asset-backed debt.
What's that? Asset-backed debt. That's a
Asset-backed.
big set of words.
Yeah, it's also called secured debt.
Okay.
This is an asset is something that's worth something.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and it's increasing in value, ideally. So typically an asset is something that has a value and hopefully is growing in value.
Okay.
And what you can do is you can go to a bank and say, hey, because I have this thing that's worth something, you can give me a loan, and if I don't pay the loan, you can have this thing that's worth something. So the most common example of this is a mortgage on a house. And I'm not going to spend a long time on this, but my main counsel here would be really careful. They're the most stable kind of debt. They're also typically the biggest for houses. But they can also there can be really easy to take it on. It can go to a mortgage, and next thing you know, you're paying $2,500 a month in mortgage payments, and you have too much house because, again, the bank wants to make money. So the bank wants to loan you the biggest mortgage they can give you without getting in trouble with the regulators.
So they can earn money.
So they can earn money, right. So be really careful. Be really, really careful.
Okay.
That's all we're going to say on that.
All right.
If people want to do a longer talk on mortgages and housing, we can do that later, but I don't think it's our primary audience. What is probably more relevant to our people is school debt.
Yes, definitely. Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it's a fact of life.
Yeah.
When Laura and I got married, I graduated without any school debt. I was really blessed with for a whole number of reasons, but I married into some school debt, and so it was a good time. And it was now school debt. I would say I've marked this here as neutral.
Okay. Why neutral?
So school debt can be wise, but it can also be really unwise.
Okay.
And it depends on your unique circumstances, your story, your background, your reason for taking the school debt on, what you do with the school debt. There's a lot of variables. And the reason I say neutral here is that I want us to take a more cautious approach to school debt. I think it's so normal that everyone's like, just take the OSAP. If OSAP's going to give it to you, just take it. And I think we want to be a little bit more cautious. So we don't want to just take the money because we're being offered it, or take the most, or just spend it however we want. It's debt. And we need to remember that we have to pay every penny back plus the compounding interest.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty significant. And the reason that school debt is challenging is that you don't have to pay it while you're a student. So it's sort of like you're getting free money. It sort of feels like free money,
it does
right?
sometimes.
So we want to be really, really careful. So just going through lots of schooling and taking on lots of debt without any realistic prospect of paying it off, I would be really careful with doing that. You want to be careful with just taking on debt. The other thing I've realized is that a lot of our students have poor financial habits. So they get a $10,000 check from OSAP and then they just don't know what to do with it. They don't have a budget. They haven't thought through their finances. And so the key is to remember that when you receive the school debt, to have a plan for what you're going to do with it.
Yeah. Okay.
And that for that reason, I say it's neutral. Like if you're going to use it to pay your tuition and you're going to get a job to pay your living expenses and you're going to scrimp and save and live cheap and do whatever, okay, that's probably neutral. It's probably okay. But if you're going to use it to go buy the latest gadget or have a fancy cell phone or upgrade from the iPhone 4 to the iPhone, I don't even know what version they're on right now, 46 or something, that would be really unwise.
Yeah.
So I think we want to be cautious there, right?
Okay. So you're saying using the same approaches to avoid the debt, but if you do take it, still being smart and like using wisdom and organizing it all.
Budget, accountability, and I think the key one is contentment. Only, maybe a good practice is if you're taking on school debt, only use the school debt to pay for school.
Yeah, okay.
Or things directly related to school. Like try to be as constrained on that as possible. And I just say this not to say any guilt. Like if your story is that you need to take school debt on, like that's okay. It's not. There's no shame in that. But be wise. Be really, really wise with it. Have a plan. It is a big deal.
Yeah.
Don't be trivial about it. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Don't be like my friend who. Well, for a whole number of reasons, don't be like my friend. So I think you had some thoughts around actually paying for school debt, right?
Yes, because I just finished school in July. And so for me, my interest begins on the OSAP that I got in March 2021. So a tip is really just to know when your interest starts, when you're done school and when you have to start paying off your loan. When does my interest start and how much do I owe? What is my interest rate? These are really good questions just to know when you're looking to start paying off that debt, so you can put it appropriately in your budget and you can plan appropriately. Also, another tip, if you don't need to take all of the OSAP loan, like if you can just take the grant, just do that. Or if you are able to take the loan and you realize you don't need it all, save and invest it. You don't have to spend it all if you don't need to. And another quick tip just for applying for OSAP, which is maybe more relevant later because we're in the middle of a term right now, but if you have been out of school for 6 years, you don't need to include your parents' financials on your application, so that will change the amount that you're getting. So just keep that in mind as well.
That's good.
So let's talk about car debt.
Car debt. This is another interesting one. Like school debt, I think people are like, we just kind of accept it as a fact of life, but I'm going to go ahead and classify this as bad. So if school debt is neutral, car debt is bad. It's like to be avoided at all costs, or if at all possible. It doesn't mean that it's not evil. Like we're going to talk about evil debt in a minute, which is the like do whatever you can to never do it. And car debt is bad. We should be trying to avoid it. And the reason I say this is that cars, we can be kind of deceived on this. We can treat cars like an asset. Like we can think that, okay, I have a car and it's now worth something. But I've got bad news for you. Your car is a sinkhole for money. I love my cars. I've been blessed with some cars, and they are money pits. They are not assets. They decrease in value over time, and they cost you money to have.
Yeah.
And so we really want to be careful with taking on car debt because it is these relatively large amount, usually in the tens of thousands, if it's a debt on the car. And we're going to be paying for that for a long time.
Yeah.
Number
of years.
Pardon?
Number of years, I said.
Yeah, a number of years, yeah. And as we pay for it, it's going to, it almost always is avoidable. Not in all cases, but there's a lot of smart things we can do. The car industry is wired, they want to get us into new cars. They want to get us into cars that are more expensive. Why? Because they want to make money. But we, as believers, we want to live in a way that allows us flexibility and allows us to live with humility. And so we really want to approach this question of cars really, really carefully. Now, I'm not saying you should never have car debt. I've used a little bit of debt to buy my first cars when I was in my early 20s because I had a family and I had to kind of figure it out. But it was like, get out of that as quickly as possible. Car debt shouldn't be part of our normal rhythm in life. Maybe for a season it's okay. So I think you had some thoughts too you wanted to share on that.
I did. I wanted to share some things just that I learned when I bought my car recently. It was the first car that I bought, and these are just some general tips that I wanted to share. One thing, and these tips are just to avoid car debt. So one thing, consider alternatives for buying the car, right? Do you really need it? Can you take transit? Can you carpool? Are there ways that you can get around? Or do you actually need to buy the car just because it is, as Robin said, like a money pit? It costs a lot of money. Think about whether you can afford it, not just the car, but the gas, the parking if you need to pay for parking, insurance, maintenance, snow tires because we live in Canada. So there are so many other fees, not just the car, right?
Yeah.
So just consider those things and if you can actually afford all of those things along with the car.
A good number that I like to use is a minimum of $1,000 a year in maintenance plus all the carrying costs of the car.
Okay.
So that's like a minimum. Like if you're getting away on $1,000 a year for maintenance, you're doing well.
Okay, good
So-
to know. Didn't know that. All right. Next one is do your research. Just look into how much certain cars cost, right? Don't just willy-nilly go to a car shop. So do your research and buy a used car. So if you're going to buy a car, there's no need to buy a new car. We talked about the value just decreasing as soon as you drive it. As soon as you leave the dealership, it's decreasing in value. So buy a used car. There are pros and cons to buying used and new, right? But you save a lot of money when you buy a used car. Let's keep going. So yeah, make a budget and stick to it. It's so easy to have a kind of flexible budget and then someone offers, we'll give you this for extra $500 and you say, it's okay, it's fine. And that's when you start to rack up a whole bunch of other fees that you didn't really account for. So make a budget, stick to it. If you need someone to help you keep you accountable to that budget, bring someone in to help you keep you accountable to that budget. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in there and say, I think using the wisdom of the church as a whole on this, for those of us that are a bit older, I've owned many cars. I've bought cars for the church. I've bought cars for myself. I've owned every type of car, but not just me. Like a lot of us have done have a lot of experience with cars. Leverage that experience.
Yeah.
Bring somebody with you that knows what they're doing. So whenever I buy a car, I bring my buddy Angel along because he knows his stuff and he knows the deal when he sees it.
Sweet. Awesome. So some more tips. Consider fees that are associated with buying a car from a dealership if you're doing that, like an admin fee. Consider tax. So yeah, just another reminder not to only look at the number, the amount that the car is worth, like the amount that you're paying. Consider all of those additional fees.
Yeah.
All right. Consider your payment options. So is this a single payment? Are you able to pay for the whole car at once? Are you paying, are you financing? Do you have a timeline? What is your interest rate? Consider all of these things, how you're going to be paying for this car. And one that Robin mentioned to me yesterday was avoid a decision on the spot. There is no urgency. Did you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I think we can, when we go into these big decisions, it can feel so urgent, like we find the car and it's perfect. My encouragement would be never make a decision right on the spot. Especially if you're buying it in a sales environment, they're probably going to pressure for the decision. You don't need to make the decision. Go home, think about it, invite somebody to talk about it with you. That's not just a counsel on car buying, that's any purchase. Generally, you don't need to make the decision on the spot. The only time we do it is when it's like an auction, which I don't think most of you are going to auctions, so just delay it. And it's okay to delay it for a day or two to clear your head and invite somebody in. So, yeah.
And the very last point is just not to lease. So you've probably seen options like buy a car or lease a car, and you don't need to lease. Do you want to go into leasing or?
Yeah, just really briefly, leasing is really popular with business owners, and there's some tax reasons for that. But for the average consumer, leasing is basically just another form of debt. And you just don't get the benefits of owning the car and having some of those upsides. And so typically, I think the counsel would be find a cheap used car if you're getting into the car market and drive it till it breaks. And then be okay with that. There's no shame in driving cheaper cars, despite what a very large industry would love to have you believe.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Ooh, great.
Cool. All right, let's talk about some evil debt.
Evil debt.
Evil
All
debt.
right.
I need like wah, like an organ. Where's Gordon? Wah wah. So this is consumer debt. So consumer debt is like any debt that we're basically paying for stuff in our life. It might be purchases in our week to week. It might be gadgets. It might be vacations. It might be TVs. Anything where we are not paying for it up front is likely consumer debt, and it is evil. Consumer debt is the greatest form of evil. It is where we basically raise our standard of living above what we can actually afford. And so if you earn $3,000 a month, consumer debt is when you live like you're earning $3,500 a month or $3,100 a month. You're not likely going to live like you're earning $6,000 a month, but it's just that little bit. It's like the boiling frog.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just going to live a little bit above my means, just a little bit. And that's what kills us. As a church, we've invited us to always live, and this is why giving is so important. It forces us to live not above our means, but just below our means. We want to live at a lower standard than we can financially sustain, not at the standard or above it. And when we live above it, that's when we end up with consumer debt.
Yeah.
And so the most evil form
Yep.
of consumer debt, the greatest evil
Of all evils.
of all evils, well, maybe the second greatest.
Yeah. It's like,
Of evil of all evils in the debt world is credit cards. The greatest is loan sharks on like the money shops and those guys.
oh, okay.
Just don't go there. But credit cards are truly, truly evil. And the reason is that their interest rates are so high. A good interest rate on a credit card is like 19%. And that's like unbelievably high. 20%, 21%. I think my credit cards are like 23%. Credit cards are so dangerous because the interest rates are so high. And so let me say it really clearly, you should never be paying interest on your credit card,
Okay.
period,
Why not?
because the interest rate is so high.
Okay.
And credit cards are almost always used to pay for things that indicate we didn't budget or didn't save. And so I think you had some tips on credit cards, right?
I did, yes. So one, always use a debit card if you can. I know sometimes someone asked me a question, when should I use a credit card and when should I use my debit card? You can always use your debit card, just that's your go-to. Know your payment due dates. Know when things are due, so you avoid late payments, you avoid missed payments, you avoid paying interest, right? Check your statements often, like once a month or so. Look for any transactions that you don't recognize or changes to your interest rate. I did this a couple months ago and I noticed I had Amazon Prime somehow and I was like, what? So I just canceled it and thankfully Amazon Prime gave me a refund. So like that's why you check, right? To see any transactions that you don't notice and then you can get on top of them. Pay off 100% of your balance each month. So it can be really easy just to pay off the minimum or just to pay off what you think is reasonable, but try to pay off 100% each month, right? Paying the minimum really just keeps you in that cycle of eventually paying interest or having to pay it later. Did you have any thoughts about that one?
No, I just think that's exactly it.
Sweet.
Pay off the balance every month if you're going to use your credit card. And if you can't do that, then don't have a credit card, would be the counsel.
Yeah, and just avoid debt. Don't use your credit card to pay for something if you can't pay for it right there. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a good rule. If you don't have the cash in your bank account to pay for it that day, you shouldn't be using your credit card. So, very, very dangerous. This is like the slippery slope of debt. So, two other kinds of debt I just want to highlight here. Under consumer debt is the buy now, pay later, right? So 0% financing, you can have this. That is a special kind of evil because it's basically saying your future self will worry about it. And as Christians, we care about our future selves. I care about Robin today and Robin a year from now because I want myself a year from now to be more effective, more generous, and more missional.
Yeah.
And buy now, pay later basically steals that. They're just a trap. So the last one is, and I think this is where we need to be really careful, is that emergency purchases are also bad. When we use debt to pay for emergencies, that's an indication that we've not planned appropriately. So sometimes people will be like, well, I had to go into debt because this emergency came up. And we're going to talk about this, but that's why you save. Very few emergencies should require debt. Most of the time, we should be able to pay for emergencies out of our savings. And that's why saving aggressively early on in life is so important, because it sets you up for success. So Laura and I, as a habit, for example, we can survive some pretty serious emergencies, like complete replacement of our entire car from scratch, like all kinds of major things in cash. Why? Because we've saved really carefully. Emergencies are not a reason to go into debt.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
Maybe challenges some thinking a little bit.
Well, what you mentioned there about it being an indication that you weren't saving is helpful, because it's not bad to pay for emergencies. You need to pay for emergencies.
Yes.
But how you're paying for them indicates your preparedness, right? Your
Exactly.
organization.
So you want to be prepared, and just don't be comfortable. Like, if like debt should be this kind of this icky thing, and that's okay. It doesn't mean we need to be ashamed, but it should kind of be like, I don't really want to do this, and I'm going to find another way.
Yeah.
So if you are in debt, I think you were going to walk us through a quick inventory,
I was,
and then we're going
yes.
to do Q&A. So if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat now, and then we'll be back, or Courtney's going to walk us through something on
Debt inventory.
debt inventory, help us get out of debt, and then we'll be right back for Q&A. Thanks, guys.
All right. So by now you should be able to see a screen, maybe a couple more seconds, but I can explain what a debt inventory is. We're going to look at this hypothetical scenario of someone who has a bunch of debt, looking at things like their interest rate, why they're in debt, and just planning some next steps. So if you're in debt as well, this could kind of just help you look at what information you might need to get and look at some next steps for yourself. So you can see it up there on the screen? All good? Okay, great. So let's start with this column here, A, type of debt. This person here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Their first one here is school debt, right? So they owe $30,000 in school debt. There is no credit limit, it's not a credit card. Current value is 0, and they're paying $500 a month. Their interest rate is 6%. Oops, there we go. And the purpose is education and career. Was it avoidable? In this case, no. So we have this first debt here. The second one is car debt, $10,000 in car debt. And currently the car is worth $15,000. So we can assume that this person bought the car for $15,000 and now owes $10,000. So they've already put $5,000 into the car and they still owe $10,000. Their monthly payments are $250 and they're paying 7% interest rate, right? Purpose was they wanted to have some independence, so they bought a car. Was it avoidable? In their case, yes. So you can look at the next two that are credit cards, right? 10 and 5,000. There are different credit limits here, and they're at the max. So this person is really spending as much as they can on their credit cards. They're paying monthly payments at a really high. Well, actually, this is not a high interest rate for credit card, but it's just a high number, right? 21%. And the purpose was just TV, vacation, weekly Amazon purchases, new technology, gifts, poor choices. All right, and yes, it was avoidable. And the last one is a line of credit. And right now they have $3,000 in debt for their line of credit, but they have $10,000 available to them on this line of credit. They pay $100 and their interest rate is 6%. They use this for emergencies. Was it avoidable? Yes. So in total, this person is paying $1,150 a month in debt repayments. So that's over 12 grand a year. That's over 25 grand in 2 years. That's a lot of money. So you might be thinking, okay, what do we do with this? What's the next step here? Well, we can start by tackling here our car debt, right? So to break this down, we bought this car for $15,000, yes? We've already put in $5,000, so now we have $10,000 to pay back. What we can do is sell this car, because if we sell this car at $15,000, we can pay off our debt, right? And then we'll have $5,000 to go and buy a new car, buy a cheaper car, buy a cheaper car that's worth about $5 grand. Okay, so our step to get rid of this car debt is to really sell this car and use the money that we have to buy a new one. All right? So moving on to credit card debt here, what we can do to minimize this debt is use our line of credit. You might be wondering why I skipped over school debt. I did because it's a lower interest rate, so we're going to tackle the bigger ones here, which are the 21%, the credit card debt. What we can do is use our line of credit and this credit limit that we have to pay off some of our debt. So if we're looking at the line of credit, we have a $10,000 credit limit, and we've only used $3,000. So we have $7,000 more that we can borrow, right? So what we're going to do is use that $7,000 to pay off this second credit card. So now that $5,000 is paid off because we've used our line of credit. Okay? And now all we have to do is focus on this credit card and our school debt. So what we just did is we went through some steps to minimize our debt, right? We decreased our car debt, it's no longer there. We got rid of our second credit card completely, and we maxed out our line of credit to pay off that debt. So essentially this number would go way down, and we'd be able to better plan for our future. We'd be able to put more into paying off this credit card, put more into paying off our school debt. So that's kind of the debt inventory. If you guys have questions about it, put it in the chat. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking, any questions that come up, and any other questions about anything else we talked about. Put them in the chat. Get your questions in.
Sweet. Thanks, Courtney.
No problem.
All right. We are going to go over to Discord for some Q&A. Got some good questions coming in already. I saw got a few ones that I really was hoping we would see, so that's great.
That's exciting.
Okay, here we go. So, Severin asks, how can we be responsible for using our credit card for miles and cashback rewards, and how much should we have for emergency funds? We were talking about this before.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Well, the miles one, we can talk about that a bit, like how credit card companies will have all these perks kind of to get you interested and to get you looking, but really they just, I don't know.
They want to make your money. They want to make money off you.
They want to make money.
I heard it said once this way: no one ever got rich off credit card cashback or miles. Mm-hmm. And so I would caution people from using their credit cards for that reason. That's exactly what the credit card company wants you to do. Now, are there benefits? Sure. And if you have a lot of maturity and experience with credit cards, maybe theoretically. But in almost every case, it's a trap. Mm. It's designed to be a trap, and so avoid it would be my counsel there, especially early on in your financial life. Mm-hmm. What you do at the beginning is so, so important. And so if you are 100% confident that you can pay off 100% of the balance every month, I suppose there is some upside. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's so marginal and it's really risky, especially when there may be some bad habits at play.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it's a trap. How much should we have for emergency funds? We're going to talk about that in, I think, the next episode or the one after that. We're going to go deep onto saving. And so there's not actually a super simple answer to that question. So
yeah, we'll get more into the process of saving.
Yes. So what if we work for a bank and our job is to make money for the bank in things like interest rates and debt? And how do we walk through the tension of doing our job and caring for our customers like Christ would? That's a great question, and I think it's important to be clear. I wasn't vilifying bankers. I was simply trying to make the point that their job is to make money. What I would say is a good banker, and I know lots of good bankers and mortgage lenders and who are Christians and love Jesus, and you can do that job and love Jesus. That's not totally contradictory. But the key is to always put the interests of your client first. Mm-hmm. And there will be some challenges at times where your boss may put pressure on you, or there may be some conflict there. And just as a Christian, we say, you know what, I'm going to do what's right for people. And I'm going to talk openly and honestly. And I actually believe that will make you a better, more valuable employee to the bank in the long run, because the customers will feel cared for.
Yeah.
And good banks and good bank managers would advocate for the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so care for people would be the counsel that I would say there. Yeah. Put their interests first. I don't know if you wanted to add to that. But.
No, that's good.
Good question. Somebody asked the question, something like, if you pay for the credit card before you get the statement, you don't build credit. That person, whoever told you that, that's just wrong.
Okay.
You don't have to wait for the statement to pay for your credit card.
Yeah.
In fact, if you wait for the statement, you're now paying interest in a lot of cases, or you can very quickly end up in the interest-paying state. I never wait for my statement, or very rarely, and I have built credit and purchased houses and that kind of thing. So
Sweet.
Just pay off your credit card. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
A lot of people get really hung up on credit score.
Yeah, we should talk about that.
Yeah. For the most part, if you have good financial practices and you're paying off everything every month, you don't need to worry about your credit score. I've never once been like, I wonder what my credit score is, because I just know it's good because I have good financial practices. If you pay off your credit card every month, you will have fine credit.
All right, that's good.
Same with your student loans. Most people have student loans. If you pay for your student loans, that also builds credit. So student loans are a source of credit score.
Awesome.
So for the most part, it's not something that you need to actively worry about, as long as you have good financial habits. That'd be my main thing. A lot of people are like, I need to use my credit card.
Yeah.
Nonsense. Just be wise with your finances. Put that first, and then worry about, you don't need to worry about the other stuff. It'll kind of sort itself out. How do we plan for savings while paying off debt? We're going to talk about that in the savings episode.
Next time, or next time.
Because it's we'll get deep into it. Is it Cassie asks, is it wise to use a line of credit to invest? Again, I'm going to talk about this in savings. No, it's not wise. I'm giving like the baseline advice here. Like, as you get more financial literacy and experience, there's more flexibility. But should you use your line of credit to invest? No, is the short answer. It's very risky, and you could end up in really, really deep hot water. A dear person to me once ended up in, $40,000 of line of credit debt that they lost on penny stocks on the stock market. And so
that hurts.
Yeah, it does hurt. Yeah, it was not so good. So no, you should not use a line of credit to invest.
I can't wait for that investing episode, though.
Yeah,
it's gonna be great.
It's gonna be good. We're gonna talk about it. So see here. Gordon posts a question about net zero budgets and line of credits and using them to help balance. Gordon, I know what you're asking. I think for the purposes of introductory approach to finances, that would be too advanced. I think that can be a helpful tool once you've established strong financial practices and have years of experience managing your finances. I would not recommend doing that at the beginning. I would. So I know what you're saying. I don't necessarily disagree. I would not counsel that for somebody that's in their first couple years of building savings and a budget and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Basically, you should not use a line of credit. In the very early years of building your financial base, you want to focus on savings and avoiding debt. And line of credit is debt. So, yeah.
Sweet. Someone's typing there.
How can those of us who have to take on large OSEP debts really begin to tackle them if we don't make a lot of money? Can you tackle that, or?
I can start. I think one, it's really easy to get intimidated with the number, or just the fact that you have a lot of debt, and that can kind of take away hope. But starting with basic things like a budget and seeing how much can I begin to be paying off, and also just not expecting yourself to pay it off in like 3 months. It might take a long time or just a bit of time to pay it off, and it's not a bad thing if you need to take your time, and you can do that in a healthy way.
I agree. Yeah, build a budget, and the best day to start is today. Don't delay because you feel like you can't. Start somewhere. Wherever, like anywhere is better than nowhere when it comes to paying off debt.
Yeah.
Start somewhere and start to chip away on it. And it will eventually pan out. So make a budget, start somewhere. So other questions coming in here. Hopefully this is helpful. If this has been helpful, let us know. If you have any other things that have not been helpful. So the first time we tried something as hands-on as this.
Yeah.
And I really hope it's a blessing to the church. If it's not, then please help us make it better. If it is, let us know. Give us some feedback. And that way we can tune things. So
Pick things up.
So we'll give another couple seconds here for people to post thoughts.
Oh, great.
All right. I think we are low on questions at this point, so I think we'll call it a wrap.
Sounds
You can
good.
if you get them in, we'll tackle them next week on as we talk about saving and
Yeah.
giving and consuming. So we will see you guys on Sunday
Sunday. Yep.
for Livecast and Town Hall afterwards. Otherwise, be blessed, church. Have a great week.